All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this special edition episode. Today, I am here with Omari Martin, and we're going to be talking about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the upcoming one in December, and its potential effects on higher education in the United States. We also may have a chance to touch on the Pluto return for the United States, but we know we're going to be talking higher education. So I am so thrilled to be here with you, Omari. Thank you so much for joining us. This is your Astrology Hub debut, which is always so exciting. And I'd love to just start with allowing myself and the audience the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. So can you start by telling us about your journey to becoming an astrologer?
Of course I can, Amanda. And again, I certainly want to thank you for the invitation. And my journey started actually with reading the astrology column in the Chicago Sun-Times that was written by Sydney Omar. And that started at the round of age 8. And I had a good friend. Her and I have the same zodiac sign. So my birthday, a solar return, is actually Monday coming up.
Woo!
And I'm a September Libra. She was an October Libra. And we would read it. We were so excited. Her grandmother got the newspaper delivered, and we couldn't wait to get to the newspaper. And so it was great. And, the years passed, and in high school, I would read it sometimes. Sometimes I wouldn't read the astrology column. And I graduated high school, went to college, and I started experiencing spiritual experiences. I would have a dream about someone and subsequently learn it was true if I shared the dream with them. There were times when I would think about someone, and moments later, the phone would ring and it would be that person. And back then, we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have pagers, and we didn't have caller ID.
Hmm.
And this is someone I thought about, and I wasn't expecting to hear from them. In some instances, it was someone I hadn't talked to in 6 months, or it may have been someone I had not talked to in over a year. And for me, I knew something was to that, and I no longer wanted to write it off as a coincidence. And the first thing that I knew to turn to or look at to perhaps better understand this was astrology. And in August of 1995, some astrologer who I never met did my chart. And when I received it, I noticed, the numbers on the house cusp and numbers associated or next to the planets. And I was like, wow, I want to learn the mathematics behind what makes this work, what makes it tick. And my first two astrology books ever were Astrology, A Cosmic Science by Isabel Hickey, and The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need by Joanna Woolfolk. So those are my first two astrology books ever. And some 7 years later, I came back to Chicago from Washington, D.C., and I met Christine and Norman Aarons. And Christine taught astrology or teaches astrology from a technical and theoretical perspective. Norman teaches it from a spiritual and philosophical perspective. Both of them are Taurians. They were married, and to have both of them as teachers was wonderful. They were both certified professional astrologers and knew the math. And to them, I give credit for teaching me the mathematics. And as a result, I am a professional and life member of the American Federation of Astrologers. I have a level 1 certification with NCGR, and I'm also a life member of the Organization for Professional Astrology. So it's been a great journey. And over the past 2 to 3 years, it's like I've been speaking at every conferences. And literally a few minutes ago, I received an invitation to speak at a regional conference here in the Midwest. So it's been great. And the invitation from the Astrology Hub Podcast. And this is my debut. So yes.
I love it. Oh, I have so many questions based on your story. First,
Okay.
what were you majoring in college?
Oh, great question. So in college at Howard University in Washington, D.C., my major was business administration, specializing in accounting.
Okay, so you're mathematical. I mean, you brought up the math several times, and not every astrologer does bring that up as like a highlight of their training. So I was like, it must have been something mathematical. Okay, that's really cool. Um, what do you think brought that spiritual awakening on for you in college? Like you started having these dreams and all that. Was there like a precipitating event or?
Yes, I could feel it from within, Amanda. I could feel it from within. It was growing. I had become vegetarian. I really started off vegan and then became vegetarian because it's a little more convenient. But it was becoming vegan, vegetarian. I let
Interesting.
my hair grow out. I had an afro. Now it's, what we refer to as dreadlocks. I even went through a name change. And I could just feel all this from within. And I wanted there to be outward manifestations of that. And, when you have four planets in Virgo, like, Mercury and Mars, I think you can get the math.
And when you look back now, was there a particular transit you were going through that was activating this in you?
Oh, wow. I'm going to be honest. I haven't looked back. I need to look, but I
That's really
haven't.
interesting.
I'd have to look. But I will say this one transit that stands out is that Pluto was transiting my fourth house. I experienced an eviction, although I got all of my stuff moved out before the sheriff got there. And I moved a lot as a college student.
Mm.
And, Pluto was just transiting that fourth house. And my mother told me, she said, I'm not writing your phone number down in my phone book in pen anymore. I'm only going to use pencil.
Wow. Wow. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. And then also, my third question before we go on to the topic that we're going to be talking about today. Do you still recommend those books for beginners? So you said two books that were your first astrology books. Do you still think those are good starting points for those in the audience who are just getting started with astrology?
I would say yes. And since that time, I really recommend the 6 volume set by March and McEvers, The Only Way to Learn Astrology. That 6 volume set, there's 6 books. When I actually studied volume number 1 of their book series, I passed the certification exam with the American Federation of Astrologers
Wow.
after failing it 2 times. So I got it the third time. I got it. But it was actually when I read that book, the first one by Martin McEvers, I passed the exam. And so because it's a more complete set, all 6 volumes, I recommend that.
Okay. All right. I said it was going to be my last question, but I have another one. How much of astrology do you feel is technical? And I don't want to say versus sort of heart or intuitive, but do you
Mhm.
mean like what do you feel the balance is? Is it like a 50-50 balance between technical skills and intuition, or is the balance something different? What would you say?
Okay, got it. Love that question. Interestingly, I was thinking about this the other day, and my thinking is the same as yours, Amanda. I don't want to polarize it. I don't think they should be polarized.
Mm.
And I think an individual can become a very good astrologer if you have, I'll just say it, a great memory, good critical thinking skills, and an ability to synthesize a chart. If you can do that alone, you can be a good astrologer. I think it's appropriate to say that there are some who say they are intuitive. Some say that they are psychic, and I look at being psychic and intuitive, and being having a good memory, critical thinking, and a good ability to synthesize. I look at those as mutually exclusive, in that you can have one without the other. And when you have a little bit of both, I think that can make you even a better and more effective astrologer as you choose to serve humanity with your knowledge and your gifts.
Hmm. Okay. And do you still do readings? Are you mainly teaching and speaking, or do you still read charts too?
Yes, I still read charts. I'm a college professor. I teach finance and accounting classes and banking classes. I have clients of astrology. I have students of astrology. I still read charts. I serve on the board of a few astrology organizations. I'm president of the Friends of Astrology, which was founded in 1938. I am on the board of the Astrology News Service. I'm also chairman of the board of Kepler College of the Astrological Arts and Sciences.
Wow, you are busy. Amazing.
Perhaps too busy.
I think it's amazing that you're teaching those courses in college and you're an astrologer. I mean, it's not amazing from like a historical perspective. Like that's
Got it.
what people did. But in
Mhm.
these days, it isn't a very interesting combination. And I mean, do you feel like you have to like hold back or hide your astrology from the work you do at the university? Or is it just like, this is who I am, this is what I do? And are you finding it acceptable or more people being okay with that combo that you have?
Okay, initially I was hesitant because we do know that there are people in the world who think negatively about astrology and they say bad things about astrology and about astrologers.
Mhm.
So I was reluctant and reserved. I was. And as the years went by, I just began to share it with people, particularly when I would travel to go to a conference and I may have needed to take the day off. And
Mm.
someone, manager or not, may casually ask, "Oh, well, where are you going?" And I would just tell them. And so, yeah, the word is out over the years. I actually end up doing some chart work for some of my coworkers.
I
And
bet.
yeah, they ask questions and they certainly want to know about everything that everybody else wants to know about: love, money, and health.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Amari, it's such a pleasure to get to know you and to be able to share you and your work with our audience, our community here at Astrology Hub. So again, thank you for being here. I could probably ask you a million more questions about yourself and your personal history, but we'll go to the topic for today, which is also very, very interesting. We're talking about the upcoming Jupiter Saturn conjunction. So this is on the winter solstice, right? Isn't it like on or
Yes,
right around?
yes, it is, because at that time the sun will be at 0 degrees of Capricorn. So you're correct. Yes.
Okay, so it's on the sol. Well, it's been so interesting to me this year to track the solstice energy and the interesting things happening astrologically at the solstices. So, okay, so we have Jupiter, Saturn, and then its potential impact on higher education in the U.S. So, just tell us about it. Why do you think that this particular conjunction is going to have an effect on higher education specifically?
Okay, great. Thanks for asking. So I actually took the time, as we know, the Jupiter Saturn conjunction occurs like every 20 years. And so even just, I just want to just touch on it topically, but in 1980, that was when the US Department of Education began operating. Prior to that, in 1979, President Jimmy Carter signed, into law the Department of Education. And so that was huge because it gave prominence to higher education in the United States. And then 20 years later, in the year 2000, we had the Supreme Court yet again addressing an issue about not prayer in schools, but prayer on a football field by the players before the game begins. So when
Mm.
we talk about prayer and religion, that's a Jupiter thing. We talk about education, that's Jupiter. Football is entertainment. That's Jupiter. The Supreme Court, that's Jupiter. And we talk about the ruling of the Supreme Court, well, that's Saturn, rules. And so they had to, intervene to say, hey, you can't do that, based on the separation of a church and state clause that's a part of the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. And so then, let's fast forward it to 2020. And so the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, it'll occur at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Now, it's in a fixed sign, it's an air sign. And the chart that I use, and I recognize that there are a handful of birth charts to use for the United States. The one that I use has 7 degrees of Gemini on the ascendant. And I used that chart. One, it was the first one I was ever introduced to. And second, I'm a certified teacher with the Church of Light based on the Brotherhood of Light lessons. And that's the chart that they use. I have yet to study and work with the other charts. And I'll do that in the future, everybody, I promise. But using this particular chart, let's see, that conjunction occurs in the ninth house of religion, legal matters, and universities and professors. And it's at the ingress point of Aquarius. So that's like a new beginning. And it could represent some new beginning for higher education. It's also appropriate to note that the conjunction occurs in Aquarius, the sign of universal brotherhood, the sign of the humanitarian, and perhaps issues related to higher education may be addressed from this perspective in terms of higher education for all. And so, what are some of the potential issues that may unfold with this conjunction? So some of the pressing issues right now, not all of them, but just a few of them, like 3 of them, there's the burden of student loan debt. That is significant. There's also, foreign students attending U.S. universities. That's one of the variables. And also, what about, public funding for higher education? And so according to an article that I took a look at, this was in Forbes this year, in February of this year. And the article stated, in the United States, we have 45 million borrowers who collectively owe $1.6 trillion in student loan debt. That's huge. And based on that number, it makes student loan debt the second highest debt category in the United States, right behind mortgage loans. And in addition to that, this $1.6 trillion of student loan debt in the United States is greater than credit card debt and auto loan debt combined. So this is a crisis, and this has to be addressed. In addition to that, so many students have graduated. Okay, they borrowed the money, they completed the degree program, you graduate. What are your job prospects for starting a career based on the field that your degree is in? And 6 months after you graduate, you got to start paying the money back. Well, if you don't have a job yet, how are you going to now pay this loan back? That is an issue. Let's see. Also, last year, in an article, October of last year, an article in the New York Times, and they were stating that since the year 2000, more than 100 American colleges and universities have merged. Now, we got to think about COVID-19, and we've heard, all of us, most of us have seen in the news over the past couple of weeks that many traditional brick and mortar universities, they suspended classes and they sent the students back home. Mm-hmm. Well, we know why, and we can appreciate that. However, that has an implication, perhaps a bad one for these universities. Number one, they've charged the students tuition. Well, if the students were staying on campus, they also had to pay for housing to live in a university dormitory. In addition to that, if you're living on campus, you have to eat. So you've also paid for the meal plan. Now that the university has suspended classes and flipped classes to an online format, what happens to that money that the students have paid to live in a university dormitory and to eat in the university cafeteria because they paid for the meal plan? Will that money be refunded? If so, that will adversely impact the revenue prospects that the university was looking forward to for this particular academic year. Mm. Some universities were already experiencing some trouble, if you will, financial trouble. Now, I also want to, just make a division that we have the for-profit sector of higher education and the not-for-profit sector of higher education. And in the for-profit sector of higher education, some mergers and acquisitions have occurred. For example, Strayer University and Capella University, they merged. American Intercontinental University, owned by Career Education Corporation, Career Education Corporation purchased Trident University International. So the mergers and acquisitions are occurring literally for survival. And usually there is an interest in the assets of the other organization or combining assets so that they can, survive financially. So when we talk about foreign students attending U.S. universities, so, in an article that I read with the International Education Exchange, we have about, as of 2019, 1,095,000 foreign students attending schools in the United States. Now, earlier this year, the Trump administration issued, I don't know if it was an executive order, I don't remember, but in any case, it impacted the ability of students who went back to their country over the summer. It prevented them or slowed them down from returning to the university in the United States. Well, that's a problem because it disrupts the revenue stream of those universities that have a significant number of students from foreign countries. That has to be addressed. And then when we talk about public funding for higher education, in an article that was written in the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities in October of last year, they have an article that's titled that state higher education funding cuts have pushed costs to students, and also it has worsened inequality. And so essentially what that means is that students from low-income households and students of color may now be less inclined to go to college because of the increased cost. So this is a huge issue. Now, I just shared with you that on December 21st of this year, Jupiter and Saturn will form a conjunction at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So let's move the clock forward, or shall I say, let's look forward in the ephemeris. For those of you who have that astrology software program, just move it forward. And we're going to move it forward to the date of August 9th, 2024. Why are we looking at that date? We're looking at that date because that's the first square between Jupiter and Saturn after they form this conjunction. And so Jupiter is at 17 degrees of Gemini in 24 minutes, and it's squaring, transiting Saturn at 17 degrees of Pisces in 29 minutes. So you may be wondering, well, Omari, what do you make of that? What do you think that means? Well, let's look at it, elementary with, Jupiter, and we'll look at it from the perspective of mundane astrology. So, Jupiter covers, finance and commerce, capitalism, courts and judges. And it just so happens that Jupiter covers the Republican Party. Saturn, we're talking about the administrative aspects of government and laws that restrain. Also bankruptcy, well, Saturn rules the Democratic Party. And so this square aspect, we're talking about a challenge, action, tension, resistance, and turning points. And so who's going to win? Let's just get right to it and cast it within the framework of politics, Republicans versus Democrats. And we also want to keep in mind that 2024 will be what? Another election year for President of the United States. And so Jupiter in Gemini, well, what do you know? Jupiter is in its detriment in Gemini because Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and Sagittarius, is the polar opposite of Gemini. We have Saturn in Pisces. And so, when I think of Pisces, I think of compassion, sticking up for the underdog. And so in that Saturn rules the Democratic Party, I would be willing to say that the Democratic Party is going to dig in deep and work real hard to bring about some relief, if you will, for those who are just under this burden of student loan debt, because it impacts your ability to achieve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We understand debt, but when you have too much debt, people aren't happy about that, particularly when you don't have, you're not gainfully employed to pay that money back. So I said a whole lot, Amanda. I just want to open it up. You got a quick question for me?
Oh my gosh, a quick question? I don't know about that, but Well, first of all, I wanted to just mention a really amazing podcast called Borrowed Future. It's put on by the Dave Ramsey Solutions. Um,
Yes.
and so it's all about the student loan debt crisis. And it is, I mean, it's equally terrifying, but also empowering because it's talking about other ways to do higher education where we're not bringing on that big burden of debt, which you hear all these stories from kids in this podcast, just talking about how heavy it feels. The future feels so heavy. They're looking at this huge mountain of debt. They don't know how they're going to pay it. It's really concerning. You know, you hear the number $1.6 trillion and it's like, oh, $1.6 trillion. But when you start to hear the stories of how this is impacting people's future, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
this is a really, really big deal. Okay, I have questions, but then I was going to add a fourth thing for us to think about in this discussion.
Okay.
And I want to
Okay.
see what
Great.
you think about it because of Saturn and Jupiter being conjunct in Aquarius and how that also might impact the way this plays out. Because something that's been on my heart for a very long time, and I would talk to family members about this, and I think a few years ago they thought I was a little crazy, but now they're going, maybe she was onto something. Is our higher education, the way we've been doing it, actually preparing our children for the world that is emerging? Meaning, we've been doing it this way where we go for 4 years and we do we do what we've been doing. And I'm not convinced at this point that the expense, the way that we do, like just the general, the first 2 years, you're just taking a bunch of general classes and then you start to specify all that. I'm not convinced that the structure or the way that we've been going about higher education is actually benefiting the children, or, our young people, and preparing them for the quote unquote real world. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
So
I do.
part of this discussion, I think, is when you're talking, I'm just sitting here going, oh my God, it needs a complete reset. Like it needs
Mm-hmm.
a complete rethink, what are we doing? Why are we doing it this way? And is it really serving? And
Okay.
okay, but we can go there in a sec, but I also would love if you would address our international friends, because I don't want you all to feel left out. But Omari, when we were getting ready for this, because I said, there's 25% of our audience that's international, and I don't want them to feel left out of the conversation. But Omari made a great point about why we're focusing on the United States. So I'd just love if you could talk about that, and then talk about if you think that this time period is going to result in a total reboot, restructure, like let's look at this differently, reality for higher education in general.
Okay, great. So to those who are members of our international audience today, I do want to share with you the focus was higher education in the United States, and of course, higher education exists in other countries. The model is different. So for example, I've had some of my colleagues in higher education to share with me that in Europe, and I want to say specifically London or maybe France, the focus is on an apprenticeship program where the students go to school for, I think, 2 years, maybe 3 years at the most, and they are actually preparing for an apprenticeship program, which serves as a gateway for them to enter a corporate job or a professional job. Here in the United States of America, I think there's been an overemphasis on academic training and development, and perhaps at the expense of vocational training and development. And vocational training and development is equally important. So for the sake of transparency, I am an academic. I'm currently working on a PhD in business management, specializing in accounting. And with all due respect to anyone and everyone who is an auto mechanic, hey, Omari is coming to you. Omari doesn't, I don't want to do that. I have a car.
Right.
It's a Chevy Camaro 2SS fully loaded. And every time a little light comes on, I'm taking it straight to the mechanic at the dealership. Omari is not about to pop that hood, baby, and do the work. I'm not. And so Vocational training is equally important. And so now, in certain areas of the United States, I'm in Chicago, Illinois, and we have a community college system. And the community college system, some of the colleges focus on academic training, some focus on vocational training and development to include heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, HVAC. Some focus on transportation and logistics, where, yeah, you can obtain a commercial driver's license or something to that effect. So vocational training is equally important, and vocational training is a direct pathway to entrepreneurship. Because after you complete, you're a mechanic, you can open up your own mechanic shop or go work for an established mechanic shop, learn the ropes, learn what works, what doesn't work, take that knowledge and open up your own shop. And so now there's also an emphasis or some focus on apprenticeship programs in the United States of America. And the concept is actually borrowed from an organization, an international organization that has apprenticeship programs in the United States. And it just so happens that they have partnered with the community college where I work for, and they have an apprenticeship program. So the students, they go to school for 2 years, including the summers. At the end of that, they graduate. They have an associate's degree, and they have been trained for a specific position for that corporation through the apprenticeship program. For those, most of them are offered a full-time opportunity. And because this is an international organization with offices all across the world, someone in their mid to late 20s, starting in this apprenticeship program, they could work for that company for the next 40 years. It's just that huge.
Wow.
You know, and
I'm
really
happy to
build
hear
up
that's
their
happening.
retirement plan. Oh, say that
Yeah.
again?
I'm just really happy to hear that's happening because I reflect on my 4 years of college, my 2 years master's degree, and then what I'm doing today. And the fact that I just paid off my student loans like
Oh,
2 years
good for
ago.
you.
But
Good
I
for
mean,
you.
yes, good for me. And can you believe I carried it that long? And
Ah,
what I'm doing today is just it it's so like divorced from that training, although it was psychology. So I have a master's in psychology. I'm working with people. So yes, it comes in. However, I'm looking at the way the world is changing and wondering if children are actually getting what they need to, for example, to be in an online world where it's very technologically based. There's a lot of nuances. It's very different than what we were getting trained for before. And
mhm.
so, and I know a lot of schools are offering, digital marketing training, but it's almost
Yes.
like online. We're able to access some of the greatest teachers in the world at what they're really good at, and for a fraction of the cost. Now, I do think the social aspect of college is important, and thinking of moving our entire world, virtually also makes me that I don't think that's the answer either, right? Like
Got it. I'm
everything is
with you.
online. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
But also, do we actually need to be paying the amount that we've been paying for our education to get the best education?
Got it. So a couple of things with that. So I shared previously that my bachelor's degree is business administration. My major was accounting, and like yourself, Amanda, I also have a master's degree. My master's degree is in accounting and financial management, and I just shared I'm working on a PhD in the same. What I have done, I have made the conscious choice to marry my academic training and development to my love for astrology. And so
So
that
cool.
exists in the form of astropreneurship, which is astrology and entrepreneurship combined. I
Whoa.
do teach that class at Kepler College, and I have never had a job as an accountant. I have applied for over 100 different accounting positions while I was in undergrad, and as recently as maybe 4 years ago. I have never been hired as an accountant. It's not that I can't do accounting. It's not that I am not qualified. There are some other variables I think are involved in the equation, but that's a different subject for a different time.
Wow.
But
Whoa.
the bottom line is, I've never been hired as an accountant,
Mm.
like never.
Whoa.
And so I think the universe gave me a consolation prize and said, okay, you can teach accounting and finance. And I said, okay, universe, thank you. And so again, I've married all of my academic training and development and my love for astrology together as astropreneurship. And I share that because one of you present to, Amanda's Astrology Hub podcast, that's an idea that may work for you.
Yeah.
It
That's so
may.
cool.
Now,
Mhm.
also in higher education, there's a shift occurring, Amanda. For example, in my PhD program, they are training me to be a scholar practitioner.
Mm.
I am being trained to take what I'm learning in this PhD program and apply it in the real world and get some results, desired results.
Mm.
Historically, kind of like when you do a PhD program, you learn a whole bunch of theoretical stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that sometimes theories don't necessarily have direct application for practice.
Mm.
And so that is one of the shifts, if you will, in higher education. As recently as 2 weeks ago, I was happened to be looking at some university. They were looking for some adjuncts, part-time faculty members, and they specifically stated that they preferred someone who had completed academic training as a scholar practitioner.
Mm.
That's one of the shifts
Mm.
where students are being trained to do it. So what? You know all the theories, and you can call off the names of all the gentlemen and ladies who created, invented, and introduced the world to the theories based on their original research. But to the extent that you cannot apply that on the job to get results and make the company money, that's no good. I also think there are too many colleges and universities. I think the market is saturated.
Mm.
I
Interesting.
think this first square between Jupiter and Saturn is going to tease that out. I think there'll be more mergers and acquisitions. And unfortunately, some colleges and universities may close. I think name brand universities will be spared from that, namely Ivy League schools such as Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. They'll be spared for that. And I'll also say the same about historical Black colleges and universities, such as Howard University, my alma mater. And I got to get a plug in. That's where the vice presidential candidate graduated from, too, Howard University in Washington, D.C. Just got to get a plug in, And also Morehouse College and Spelman College. So we have Ivy League institutions and historical Black colleges and universities where they name brand, and generation after generation after generation of family members are loyal to that school. So they may be spared a little bit, or the impact may be minimal to them. But for those private institutions that don't have that type of legacy or name brand, and they don't get publicly funded through a state government, those institutions who have not fared well within the recent years, they may close or may have to merge, or they may be acquired by another institution.
Do you think that the conjunction happening in Aquarius is indicating a trend towards more online learning, more virtual? I mean, we have a lot of other indicators as well, but do you think that
Yes.
the astrology is pointing to that trend being something that will continue in higher education?
Yes, I do. I do believe that. I think it's appropriate to mention, that, higher education was really not higher education, online education was really kicked off by the University of Phoenix and the
Oh,
Apollo
yeah.
group. And the gentleman's first name is Jerry and Perpisco. I'm sorry, Mr. Jerry. I don't remember your last name off the top of my head, but I think it starts with the letter P. But nevertheless, he was the one to really introduce online education in that specific manner, where individuals could learn. And we got to think about it. I mean, I attended Howard University, which was founded in 1867. If Howard University had offered classes online, I would have been able to graduate sooner.
Yeah.
But as a first generation college student, I had to work in order to pay my rent and buy food. So, I made a trade-off.
Yeah.
I had to in order to survive. And so online education has made it possible for thousands and thousands of people to complete a college degree, or to start a college degree, or to go to school and earn a master's degree.
Yeah.
Online education has facilitated that. And I know some people frown upon online education, and I will admit they are not mirror images of one another. They are not. They are simply two different modalities. Now, the substance is the same, but the modality is different. They use the same textbooks. The courses have the same, if not similar, learning objectives as well as learning outcomes. I am a college professor. I teach online. I also teach in a traditional classroom face-to-face. And online education is not less than. I really want to emphasize that. It's not less than, it's just an additional option for which one can pursue the pursuit or complete a degree in higher education. So I think there will be more of that. I mean, just think about it. With COVID-19, so many universities are flipping it online, and now class is held via a Zoom session.
Yes, and then it's harder to justify the expense when you're learning that way. The other thing, Omari, that you just brought up, that it will be awesome when this happens, is the stigma around online learning. I see that someday it won't be stigmatized as less than. That the more it becomes normalized, the more people realize, like, wait, you can get a really solid education this way. Mm-hmm. That it won't carry with it the, oh, well, you just got your degree from University of Phoenix, so it doesn't count, or it doesn't count as much as. And would
exactly.
Would you say as a professor that the students that you have that learn in the classroom versus the students that learn online, do you think the result is like tremendously different, or that they come out equally prepared for whatever's next?
Okay, so the result is not tremendously different. So let's just look at online education a little closely. In an online learning environment, there is a higher degree of accountability. When that assignment is due on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Central Time, either you turned it in on time or you didn't. And they actually program it so that at 12 midnight, 1 second later, it closes and you can't submit it. So there's a higher degree of accountability. A student must also have a basic level of knowledge of how technology works. They have to know how the internet works. They have to know how to send an email, receive an email. They have to learn how to upload a document from within the classroom. So their familiarity with technology and how it works is higher. Whereas in the most purest sense of a traditional school where there's no, interface with technology, when that student graduates, their familiarity with technology based on their academic experience won't be the same as a student's knowledge of technology based on their experience taking classes online. Again, online education is not less than. I can say with 100% certainty, I've had students to fail my class when I taught online, and I have students to fail my class in the traditional classroom. There's some students are students.
Yes, totally. Exactly. Okay.
Students are students.
Yes. Okay, Omari. So if we were to sum this up, I do want to ask you about the Pluto return, by the way.
Okay. So, that's fair. We're good.
Okay. So if we were to sum this up, you see major overhauls and revisiting and revising of things like, or the need to address the huge student loan debt, the issue with the foreign students. These are creating real issues for universities, the public funding and all the shifting that's happening there. And the astrology indicates that these are big things that will be restructuring as we move into the future, is what you're saying.
Yes. To sum it up, I would say that the time has come to redesign, or to focus on Saturn, to restructure the model that we have in place for higher education. We have solid evidence, if you will, that the current model is starting to break down, again, based on this significant amount of student loan debt. The issue of more and more foreign students desirous of coming to the United States to earn what they label a Western degree, and also the public funding for higher education. These are significant issues that must be addressed. And Saturn, you're talking about restructuring, redesigning, and coming up with a new philosophy in terms of higher education administration. Administration is associated with Saturn. And you talk about Jupiter. Well, in order to make some of these changes stick, it'll have to take place through new laws and through new rules through the United States Department of Education.
Fascinating. It's going to be so interesting to watch this continue to unravel itself and then rebuild itself. I have two young daughters. And so the question is like, should I be putting money into their, like, the traditional college fund savings things?
Oh, yeah, the 529.
Yeah, and I look at it and I'm just like, gosh, I just feel like the future is so uncertain. It's going to be very different by the time they get to college. And I'm not as compelled to put money into those traditional things because I just have the sense that it's going to be really, really different. And we need to just sort of ride this time period out. And we'll see. We'll see.
Yes, we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Omari, because you've been so generous and you already told me that you're in for another like 10, 15
20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Okay, great. Well, then
2025. Okay, let's do it.
Let's talk about the Pluto return for the United States and how you see all of that impacting what's happening right now.
Okay, great. So I think it's appropriate for me to just share with everyone that the Pluto return will occur 4 times. The first time it'll happen, it'll be February 21st of the year 2022. The second time it happens, it'll be July 11th, 2022. And that will be when Pluto is in retrograde motion. There will be a third hit on December 28th of 2022. And then there will be a fourth hit. Now, this fourth hit will be a powerful hit. And I say that because the planet will station direct at 27 degrees. So this is a station point. Now, in the chart that I use with 7 degrees of Gemini on the ascendant, 7 degrees Gemini and 34 minutes is on the ascendant. Pluto rules Scorpio, and Scorpio is actually intercepted in the 6th house. So within the context of mundane astrology, the 6th house covers armed forces, police, firemen, civil service employees, the medical profession, public health, labor and labor unions, the house of common people, or the working class. Even now, I think more and more U.S. citizens, and I don't think this is limited to the United States. I think this is a universal thing across the world. But what we are observing is a greater divide between the have and the have-nots. And the way the U.S. system is set up, I'll label it Western capitalism. You work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. Every 2 weeks, you receive a paycheck. And the assumption is that that'll be enough for you to cover your living expenses, go out on a date with your spouse or significant other on Saturday night, a dinner and a movie, and, all that other good stuff. And what's happening is that in addition to the 2 wage earners and in the traditional household, or 2 adults living in a household, both of them are working, well, perhaps in order to stay afloat or even to get ahead, one of them may have to obtain a part-time job. And then, if you have children, well, those of you with children, Amanda, you know what that story is about. It's a good story, but you know what that story is about in terms of household finances. And so this Pluto return will occur in the ninth house. So we have long distance, foreign travel, religion, churches, law courts, lawyers, universities and professors, scientific societies. It also rules the State Department, Secretary of State, immigration, coastal waters, and their conditions. So within the context of mundane astrology, those two houses cover a lot of stuff. I think with the Pluto return, particularly with that fourth hit, we may have the working class people across the world really, how do I want to say this, organizing. I want to stop short of using the word revolting, but they may really rise up to say, hey, this is wrong. This is out of order. We got to change this. And I think one of the things that's fueling it is greed. Here in the U.S., the conversation a few years ago was about the 1%ers and that they control most of the wealth in the country. Some would say that that's not a good thing. And the undercurrent to even some of the conditions we're seeing, not just in the United States, but across the world, economics is the undercurrent of that. And let's see. So I would say with this Pluto return, the issue of labor and labor unions has to be addressed. And not that labor unions, depending on how you look at it, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but people do want fair wages. People do want health care. People do want work-life balance. You talk about the sixth house. Well, the sixth house is what? Public health. Hopefully, by this time of the Pluto return, who knows, maybe we will have a viable vaccine for COVID-19 that works. Perhaps. If so, that'll be a good thing. We also have this thing of long distance travel. Well, if there is a vaccine for COVID-19 at that time with this Pluto return, perhaps the prospects of long distance travel will return to normal, where when you get to the other country, there won't be a 14-day self-quarantine, and coming to the US, there won't be a 14-day self-quarantine, or one country won't block people from flying in from another country because of COVID-19. So, Pluto represents what? A total and complete symbolic destruction or symbolic death, followed by a total and complete rebirth. Now, that symbolic death, that symbolic destruction, yes, it will be painful. It will be painful. There may be some symbolic casualties, but after that, after the storm is over, if you will, it'll be a new beginning, a fresh beginning. And I think various aspects of human life, no, not human life, but humanity, various aspects of humanity will just outright be transformed. Now, because I'm referencing the Pluto return of the United States, I think that's really going to play out heavily for the United States of America. And again, that station point where Pluto turns direct on October 11th of 2023. That month of October of 2023 will be a very significant one, and it'll be the year before the next presidential election in the United States.
Wow. So I can sort of sense, maybe it's just me, what people might be thinking or wondering, because this is still 2 years away from now. So
yes,
are you seeing the turmoil and the unrest and the discomfort, everything we've been experiencing this year? Are you seeing this? I don't want to use, kind of drag out, but is it going to be going until 2022 and into 2023, are you seeing this as like the way that
Oh, okay.
you see what I'm saying? Because
Yes, I do. I see what you're saying. Well, I think various aspects of it will occur over time. I mean, to give an analogy, and this may not be the best one, so forgive me if you don't like this analogy, but a volcano eruption, it
yes,
just doesn't happen inside of a 30-minute window. There's a buildup, there's
right.
a little rumbling, and people feel the rumbling and they look around. And then the closer you are to the volcano, there will be an increase in the temperature, around the volcano. It's heating up. That lava is boiling up. That lava is about to boil over. And then at some point, there is where the volcano explodes. And then all this lava comes out. All this lava comes out and it rolls down the side of the volcano. And then there's a period of time in which the lava from the volcano will do what? It will cool. It will harden. And so another analogy that some of you may like better is that the changing of the season. So today is what? The fall equinox. It's, the first day of fall. And so it's not like we go from 75, 80 degrees the day before the fall equinox, and then every day thereafter, it's only going to be 55 degrees outside. Nature doesn't work like that. There's a blending of the energy, some overlapping, so to speak. And yes, there'll come a point, maybe November 15th, where in Chicago, we won't see 80 degrees again until the following year. But there's a blending of that. And some of the things we're experiencing now, Amanda, I think it's like, precipitation, building up to that. We have civil unrest. So the sixth house within the context of mundane astrology is the armed forces and the police. We know earlier this year, the president, wanted to send the National Guard to various hotspots in the country for quote unquote crowd control. Well, he was sending the armed forces. We know the police, we know what that conversation is, as well as, various protests with respect to Black Lives Matters and other movements. Right now, so many people are unemployed, not just in the United States, but across the world. And for those individuals who were professionals in the hospitality industry, I mean, for example, United Airlines, that's based here in Chicago, Illinois, they are in a conversation that they're going to lay off 16,000 employees come October 1st or the first week of October. That's a lot of people. And that's just one airline. What about the other domestic airlines? I'm not familiar with how some of the other foreign governments, for example, those countries that are part of the European Union, off the top of my head, I'm not familiar with how those respective governments have chosen to address the adverse impact of COVID-19 on the hospitality industry. But nobody's, hanging out at a party, pool party at a hotel, and, all that other kind of stuff. So this will have an impact on that profession, hospitality, and it'll have an impact on the common people. Or the working class people. Many of the working class people have careers and jobs in the hospitality industry, and COVID-19 has been a big dent in their side. We also have that with the ninth house, that's not so much health, but it's scientific discoveries. What is this vaccine for COVID-19 all about? It'll be a scientific discovery, to find and identify a vaccine that is viable and that works for the majority of people with minimal or preferably no side effects. That's important. Vaccines don't show up inside of a 6-month window. They just don't. That's years of research. I don't know how many years, but I will still maintain that's years of research. It's a scientific discovery. That's a ninth house activity within the context of mundane astrology, and also coastal waters and their conditions, rising coastlines. So we know, based on what scientists are telling us, that in the Arctic, some of those glaciers are melting, sea levels are rising. That will bring about erosion, and coastal waters will rise. I don't know, maybe, in, 5 to 10 years, someone may notice that the water is 5 feet higher or 10 feet higher. So that ties into a conversation about global warming. And the question is the planet really, warming up? And of course, people are sitting on both sides of the fence on that one. But it begs the question, are we experiencing global warming based on some of the things that are occurring? And so I think, these things are happening right now. And I think with that Pluto return, and actually, no matter where it sits, every country that was in existence at that time will experience the Pluto return, and it will impact other countries as well. But here in the U.S., this is a for real thing, and we're experiencing that now with with the working class people. Some people who work for, I won't name it, but this is like the largest retailer in the world. Some of you know who that is. And the family that owns that business, they're billionaires. And some of their employees who are dedicated and loyal, they don't necessarily make enough money to live off of. Right now, there's a conversation in the United States about $15 an hour as the minimum wage. Well, the question becomes, really, can someone live off that? I do want to acknowledge that there's certain jobs, particularly if someone works in a fast food restaurant. I don't think that job was ever intended to be a livable wage job. I don't think that was ever a part of the business model for a fast food chain. And generally speaking, they would, hire teenagers, college students, or maybe seniors who wanted to work part-time. And it's really the managers of those fast food restaurants are making the salary with the benefits that they can live off of and take care of their families. So I hear, yes, one side of the argument in terms of $15 per hour as the minimum wage. And to some degree, I also hear the conversation that some businesses are saying or implying that, hey, that position was never meant to be a livable wage job. That's not a part of the business model. Right. And that has an adverse impact on them. So they end up, because it's the law in certain states, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And what do? They cut labor in terms of the number of hours that people work, and they may lay some people off.
Lay people off. They may go out of business. They may raise their prices, so then the people have to pay higher. I mean, it's all interconnected and interrelated. Yes. And complicated. And we've created it's a very complicated web of issues that is, from what I'm hearing, we're building up, which I think most people feel like, oh God, it feels like the eruption's happening right now. But from what you're saying, it's like, no, we're actually building up to 2022, where there's going to be even more of a release of a tension point that we're getting inklings of the different kinds of issues that we'll be working out from now until then. And it's not like they're new. We've been working them out for a while.
Right, exactly. This is not new. This is not new stuff. I mean, when we think, for those of you who may be familiar with the history of Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate. Well, Andrew Carnegie, he was in the steel business, getting the steel, the ore from the earth, smelting it down, processing it, forming it into rails for the railroad, because that was his number one customer at the time. And, they had 3 8-hour shifts. Right. He wasn't in a conversation about shut it down. Hey, when the first 8-hour shift was ending, he wanted that second group of men, and ladies, I say men, because at that time, only men were miners. All due respect. Okay. So, and so the second group of men showed up. And when the second shift was over, the third shift, that group of men, they showed up. He turned that into a 24-hour operations. When you're in that mind, it is dangerous. At that time, it was not safe. They were underpaid. There was no workman's compensation. There was no health care. And really, the incidents and all of the activities and the emotions around that's what gave birth to labor unions.
Wow. Oh my gosh, Omari, it's so interesting to think about the origins of some of these things that are in place and how they're being applied today, and how it doesn't really, it's kind of like goes back to our conversation about the universities, that are these structures that are in place actually serving what they were intended to serve in the very beginning? And if they're no longer serving with the way they were meant to, how do we adjust them? How do we change them so that they actually do accomplish the things that we were trying to accomplish in the first place? Which for university, it's like preparing children, or not children, young adults, to go out into the world and contribute to the workforce and be able to make a living and be able to take care of their families and to be able to have a life. So it's all these things that are just being asked, so many aspects of life that we're being asked to just revisit, rethink, not be so attached to the way that we did it, and start to imagine a new way to do things. Omari, one of the things we do at Astrology Hub is we bring it back to, okay, here's all the information. Here's what the astrology is telling us. What can we do with this? How can we feel empowered with this information in our life? How do we work with it? What are ways that we can use the information to actually help us in our lives? So I would love to hear your thoughts on this in terms of either parents preparing for education, or even just this idea of gearing up to a 2022 Pluto return. How are you working with it? How would you advise clients to work with all of this turmoil that's up?
Okay, great. Thank you, Amanda. So with that, I want my just gut instinct initial response to your question is I encourage everyone to reframe this business. Think about it in new ways. Look at this from a different angle. Look at this from a different perspective. We also want to keep in mind that this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. The motto for Aquarius is I know, knowledge. What do you know? We know Uranus is the ruler of astrology, and Uranus rules the internet. The internet, things are happening so quickly now. Years ago, you have to go to a library. You'd be hanging out in the library for 3 or 4 hours just looking for a handful of articles. Now you can get a few dozen articles on your screen in a matter of 3 seconds. So look at it from a new perspective, a different perspective. Be innovative, and don't be afraid that if the idea you have disrupts the status quo or upsets the apple cart, disrupt the status quo, upset the apple cart. It's okay. They'll get over it. And keep in mind that, yes, some people resist change. Don't be afraid. Don't resist change. Change is the only constant. Everything changes. There's no resistance. And one more thing I want to add, Amanda, is that we are also on the cusp of a generational change in power. So for all of you baby boomers who are listening to me, I love you. Know that. However, we don't all get another 70 years on top of the 70 years that we've already been here. And for my generation, Generation X, we owe it to the baby boomers to prepare ourselves to learn as much as we can from them. They have paved the way, a good way for us in many respects, and we want to prepare ourselves to properly receive and inherit the legacy that they gave us so that we can add and contribute to it and then pass that down to the generation after us. So again, moving forward, look at it differently, upset that apple cart, be a disruptor, just make it change. And don't be afraid. Some people won't support you. Some people won't believe in you. And so what? But, Uranus is prominent in my chart, and I like to do that a little bit.
Nice. Oh my gosh, Omari, it's been so great to have you here, to get this opportunity to get to know you, to learn from you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Amanda. Again, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it. No, Brother Omari loves you. And if you invite me back and will have me back, I'll come.
Awesome. Awesome. That's so good to know. Omari, for people that are interested in learning more about your work, where should they go?
Okay, great. So my website is www.solarwisdom.com. Let me spell that for you. That's www.solarwisdom.com. Feel free to email me, omari@solarwisdom.com, SOULAR wisdom.com. And that's how you can reach me. And again, Amanda, thank you.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. For those of you interested in getting a weekly email from me that summarizes and directs you to all the different special edition episodes that we're doing every week here at Astrology Hub, you can go to astrologyhub.com. At the very top, we made a little bar. It should be easy for you to see it. Put your name and your email in there. And then every week you'll get a highlight reel, essentially, of all the special edition episodes so that you don't miss a thing. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of our community. And thank you for making astrology a part of your life. I'll catch you on the next episode, which is coming up very soon here with Georgia Stathis. She is a financial astrologer. For those of you interested in your money and what's going on and what the astrology says about the economy and your money, you won't want to miss this one. All right. Omari, you're awesome. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon. Take care,
All right.
everybody.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.